When you're winning a war, you build bigger tanks, faster planes, and more enormous battleships. You have the luxury of time, resources, and confidence. The factories hum with production, and the engineers focus on refining what already works. The path forward is clear. More of the same, but better, stronger, and faster. But when you're losing, that's when things get interesting. The rules change. Suddenly the old ways aren't enough, and desperation breeds a strange kind of creativity. One that's as dangerous as it is innovative. Sensible engineers are pushed aside, and the wildest ideas suddenly get the green light. The impossible becomes the new standard, and the line between genius and folly blurs. This is the world of secret weapons, kamikaze rockets, radio-controlled bombs, and inventions that seem ripped from a comic book. These weren't just weapons, they were last-ditch hopes, born from the minds of people who knew the clock was ticking. The Second World War was a hotbed of technological lunacy. It was a time when the boundaries of science and sanity were tested daily, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. The British had their bouncing bombs, the Americans, their Manhattan Project, and the Germans, they went all in on desperation. Each nation raced to outdo the other, not just with firepower, but with sheer audacity. By 1944, Germany was bombed day and night, armies retreating and fuel running out. The country was battered, its cities in ruins and its people exhausted by years of relentless conflict. The top brass knew conventional warfare was a lost cause, so they turned to the unconventional. They gathered in war rooms, searching for any idea that might turn the tide, no matter how outlandish. They needed something cheap, quick, and capable of delivering a massive punch. The pressure was immense, and the solutions had to be as bold as the situation was dire. Enter the idea of a human torpedo carrier, a weapon as desperate as it was deadly. It was a gamble that put human lives on the line in the hope of achieving the impossible. It's the engineering equivalent of a cornered animal, unpredictable, dramatic, and dangerous. These machines were built in haste, often with little regard for the safety of those who would use them. The story of Germany's human torpedo carrier isn't just about a weird submarine. It's about the collision of desperation and innovation, and the lengths to which a nation will go when it's backed into a corner. It's about what happens when brilliant minds are told to produce a miracle under unbearable pressure. The result is a mix of brilliance and chaos, where every second counts and every idea, no matter how wild, is considered. The results? Very German, ambitious, over-engineered, and ultimately a magnificent failure. These projects were marvels of ingenuity, but they were also cautionary tales about the limits of human invention under duress. This era wasn't about a better gun. It was about trying to change the entire game with one wild move. It was about rewriting the rules, even if it meant risking everything on a single, desperate bet. And as we'll see, the line between genius and madness was razor thin. In the chaos of war, sometimes the most outrageous ideas are the only ones left. How did Germany end up strapping men to torpedoes? It sounds like something out of a desperate science fiction story, but in the chaos of World War II, it became a grim reality. As the tides of war turned against them, German engineers and naval strategists were forced to think outside the box. Sometimes, far outside. The inspiration actually came from the Italians, who pioneered the use of human torpedoes, slow-moving underwater chariots that could slip past enemy defenses. These Italian frogmen, riding their so-called maiale, managed to sneak into Allied harbors and cause real damage, capturing the attention of navies across Europe. Meanwhile, the German U-boat fleet was suffering heavy losses. Allied anti-submarine tactics were improving, and the once-feared wolf packs were being hunted down relentlessly. German command realized they needed a new approach, something stealthy, unexpected, and capable of striking where the enemy felt safest. The problem was clear. Allied ships were now protected by layers of defenses, nets, patrols, and mines, making it nearly impossible for full-sized submarines to get close. A new kind of weapon was needed to breach these formidable barriers. Enter the Kleinkampfverbände, or K-Verband, the German Navy's special forces. These units piloted explosive motorboats, one-man submarines, and human torpedoes with names like the Nager and the Martyr. Their missions were daring, dangerous, and often deadly. While these weapons weren't officially intended as suicide craft, the odds of survival were slim. Pilots faced extreme danger from the moment they launched, and many never returned from their missions. The Germans' big idea was to use a larger submarine as a mothership, carrying these mini-weapons close to enemy harbors. This allowed them to launch surprise attacks deep behind enemy lines. They modified the reliable Type A-7 U-boat, bolting on racks for human torpedoes and mini-subs. These motherships would sneak dangerously close to enemy coasts, releasing their deadly cargo under the cover of darkness. It was an audacious gamble, one that demanded both cutting-edge engineering and a level of bravery that bordered on reckless. The K. Verbund's missions would become some of the most daring and desperate naval operations of the war. So, what did this thing actually look like? Let's set the scene. The Atlantic is cold, the war is raging, and beneath the waves, German engineers are getting creative, maybe a little too creative. Picture a classic German Type 7 U-boat, sleek, menacing, built for stealth. Now imagine a mad mechanic welding bizarre contraptions onto its deck, transforming it into something almost unrecognizable. The result? A submarine that looks like it's wearing a homemade jetpack. That's the Human-Torpedo carrier, a modified U-995, retrofitted with racks to hold 2 Marder human torpedoes. These racks jutted out from the hull, making the sub look even more awkward and experimental. The Marder itself was a strange beast. 2 torpedoes stacked together, an explosive warhead below, and a tiny claustrophobic cockpit above for a single pilot. It was as much a coffin as a weapon. The carrier sub would strap 2 of these to its back, ready for deployment. The plan was to sneak close to enemy ships, then launch the Martyrs on their one-way missions. But this setup made the submarine clumsy, slow, and noisy, ruining its stealth. The extra weight and drag turned a nimble hunter into a lumbering target. Every creak from the racks was a dinner bell for Allied sonar. The enemy could hear them coming from miles away, making surprise attacks nearly impossible. It was a massive compromise, sacrificing stealth for a secret payload. The sub's silhouette was unmistakable, and its mission was a gamble. The whole system was a prototype, rushed and untested. There was no time for perfection, just enough for a desperate shot at changing the tide of war. Engineers were improvising under pressure, making it up as they went. Blueprints were sketched on the fly, and every new idea was a potential disaster or breakthrough. The carrier was dangerous not just because of its mission but because it was a flawed, experimental machine. Leaks, malfunctions, and accidents were constant threats. It was a floating testament to desperate innovation, a symbol of how far people would go when the stakes were life or death. Not a production marvel, but a one-off gamble. Each mission was a roll of the dice, with no guarantees of success or survival, and it was as risky for its own crew as for the enemy. Every dive was a test of courage, ingenuity, and luck, pushing the limits of what a submarine and its crew could endure. On paper, the plan had ruthless logic. The mothership would sneak across the North Sea, dodging Allied patrols, dragging 2 external torpedoes. Near the target, the U-boat would surface at night. Pilots would climb out, squeeze into the Martyrs, and get released. Alone, they'd navigate through any subnets, dodge patrols, and aim for a battleship or carrier. At the last moment, they'd release the warhead and try to escape in the top half. The odds of surviving, let alone returning to the mothership, were almost zero. Every step was a gamble. One failure meant disaster. Who would volunteer for this? The men of the K. Verbund were young, fanatical, and astonishingly brave. Propaganda painted them as heroes, but the reality was grim and almost certainly fatal. Training was rushed, controls were basic, cockpits were cramped and freezing, disorientation, cold, and fear were constant enemies. Many volunteered out of patriotism, indoctrination, or a desperate hope to turn the tide. They saw comrades vanish and still climbed in. The line between bravery and madness was razor thin. Was it brave? Absolutely. Sane? Probably not. These men existed in a gray area, products of desperate times. Their story is a sobering reminder of the unimaginable sacrifices war demands. The Human-Torpedo carrier's story is not one of victory but of disaster. The main target was the British home fleet at Scapa Flow, a fortress. In late 1944, Operation Caesar was launched, but Allied intelligence was already reading German messages. The Royal Navy was on high alert. Surprise was lost before the mission began. U-boats were sunk or forced to turn back. The carrier never launched its martyrs in anger. The grand plan fizzled out. Minor successes elsewhere were pinpricks, not decisive blows. The technology was unreliable, the conditions brutal, and Allied defenses overwhelming. Missions became a tragic catalog of failures: lost pilots, broken machines, easy targets. The heroic charge turned into a series of costly disasters. What became of U-995? Its career as a human torpedo carrier was short and uneventful. After Operation Caesar failed, the special equipment was removed, and it returned to standard U-boat duties. At war's end, it was handed to the British, then the Norwegians, and finally returned to Germany. Restored and turned into a museum ship, it became a memorial to the brutal reality of the U-boat war. Today, you can walk its cramped corridors at the Labo Naval Memorial. The evidence of its strange past is gone, but its hull still tells the story of desperate innovation. It stands as a silent witness to one of Dubuquotin's strangest ideas. The human torpedo carrier was a failure, but a glorious one. It tried to achieve the impossible, using ingenuity and bravery to overcome overwhelming odds. The martyr was unreliable, slow, and deadly to its own pilots. Basing a major operation on such flawed tech was doomed from the start. Allied defenses were too strong: radar, sonar, code-breaking, and relentless patrols. The Germans were fighting yesterday's war with tomorrow's broken ideas. This was a weapon of desperation, not strategy. A short-term gamble, not a solution. Germany was running out of everything and hoping for a miracle. But wars are won by logistics and strategy, not wild gambles. The human torpedo carrier was a dramatic, futile gesture against inevitable defeat. A brilliantly mad idea that crashed into the hard wall of reality. What can we learn from this failed prototype? More than you'd think. It's a lesson in how desperation pushes human ingenuity to terrifying extremes. Secret projects like this are warnings about the seductive danger of wonder weapons. They were distractions from a failing war effort, not solutions. The real legacy is human, the sacrifices of men sent on near-suicidal missions. The U-995 is a monument to failed ambition, a reminder that the wildest ideas are rarely the best. Sometimes, the most important lesson from a secret project is why it should have remained a secret.